everybody. Reporting to you again from the Glamour City, Hollywood.
As far as the trees that are used for us, we do not. We have a third party that monitors where our trees and what forests. So there are specific forests that are using fast growing trees that is sustainable, and it's managed by not only the government, but also by some third parties. So there are tree farms that we use our paper. We don't go into any natural or any old growth forests in order to use the paper for our processes.
If you love listening to this show, please consider giving a rating and a review on Amazon Alexa or wherever you listen. We want to continue bringing you this amazing content, and part of our ability to do that means that we need a big audience. Now, it may not seem like much, but rating and reviewing the show will help more people find us, just like how you found this show. Simply on any podcast platform, search for a show, scroll down to the bottom, and push 5 stars. It's that easy. Thanks for supporting the show. Today, I'm joined by Robert Koenen, Chief Revenue Officer and Sustainability Lead at Box Water is Better. Welcome to the show today.
Hi, Scott. Nice to meet you.
So I want to talk a little bit about the origin of Box Water, and maybe starting with the spark or the vision that was co-founded by Benjamin Gott as well as Darren, the current CEO. Mm-hmm. Now, as far as Benjamin goes, he's done a lot of things, and I think he eventually ended up with industrial design, including starting Box Water, but also working on his cultural blog, The Brilliance, educational platform, thoughts.com, and is an object company where he works with materials from cotton to marble to create pieces to be worn or to be adorned in the home. How would you describe him, but also the current CEO, and how they have imbued this organization with the right mission and vision?
Yeah, it's a great question. So Box Water has been around for about 15 years. We're celebrating our 15th anniversary. And Ben and Darren put this together 15 years ago. Ben was really the creative visionary, and I say he's like he is a creative genius. He saw the inspiration came from seeing plastic and bottles everywhere. He was at the Lollapalooza event in Chicago. He also was working in logistics and saw the stacks and stacks of plastic bottles. And it was a time when he was seeing lots of excesses in the world, and he thought this was one that he could tackle and chip away. Us being from the Midwest, he naturally thought that a carton would be a great alternative to a plastic bottle, and he had already been with Darren. And Darren is a serial entrepreneur who had done a number of projects, and together they launched this brand with little to no beverage experience, but they found the sourcing, the wherewithal. Started selling it out of the back of their car, and lo and behold, literally, their first cases sold out in less than a day when they got them placed here in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Since that time, obviously, we've grown to be the leader in sustainable alternative packaging. So we're proud. We're proud that we were the first brand to come up with a sustainable alternative to plastic water bottle and aluminum cans. We take an innovative approach to everything we do. We first and foremost offer completely pure water. We have a 8-step proprietary process to filter out the water. It's a reverse osmosis process. But then along the way, we've also challenged ourselves. The name Box Water is Better. We focus on other things that I know we'll get into later about how can we help the planet. So we plant trees, we clean beaches. We've planted over 1.4 million trees over the life of our brand, completely for free, simply for people posting a picture of our carton on their social media feed. So as a result, we've built this beautiful community of people, teachers, family members, trying to talk about sustainability as well as talk about reforestation and how we can help the planet.
From my perspective, what's interesting about the founding of your organization is the time period. Because keep in mind, in 2023, what we're talking about, this topic feels fairly pretty common. But we have started back in 15 years ago. There was really not that much of a movement. I mean, there's always an undercurrent, but it wasn't really mainstream. So it was very much bucking against a trend, and in many ways, also the supply chain as well. So I wonder how they overcame some of the earlier hurdles of adoption.
It was a great idea that was a decade before its time. I started with the company about 7 years ago, and even then, people forget. Prior to COVID, I mean, we debated using the word plastic pollution because nobody understood what that meant. And this is as early as 5 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
We spent all of our marketing resources trying to educate. Most people would come back and just say, well, what's wrong? My plastic bottle, I recycle it. Why do I need an alternative? And it really hasn't been, it's really been since 2021.
Yeah.
A number of things coalesced where China stopped. So the majority of our plastic was being shipped to China where we thought it was being recycled. We learned that none of that was being recycled. So there is one of the sayings is that when you throw something away, there is no away. It's still out there. So it turns out that less than 4.7% of all plastic is actually being recycled. So that was a watershed moment, as well as obviously COVID, where people started realizing all the plastic pollution that was around us. We've come to the realization now that plastic pollution is now part of the society. It is understood.
Mm-hmm.
And now people are looking for what can we do. The things you mentioned, the hurdles that we were up against is we didn't know anything about the water business, the beverage business. We thought basically just having a very unique package, it's completely clean, it stands out on the shelf, would get people's attention. But what we didn't realize is that people are busy, and while this is important, it's not the top of their list when they're going to the grocery store. So we had to find other ways to break through the noise that people are getting. Simultaneously, you have an established beverage industry that spends, just Coke and Pepsi alone spend over $8 billion a year on their marketing budgets. So you have an entrenched system in place and messaging that's going out there that kind of obfuscates the issue, which again is why we said, well, the traditional beverage playbook is to find a celebrity and have them endorse you. But we didn't feel like that was very authentic. I think one of the things that Ben and Darren have instilled in the company is we should do things that are authentic, not just because it's traditional. We should always be challenging ourselves. What can we do better? And that's where we decided that it would be better to put that money. We could get more authentic viewers, more authentic consumers by putting money instead of to celebrities to put it towards trees. And that's why through 1% with the Planet and the National Forest Foundation, we started planting trees based on posts. So every time you post a box, we will plant 2 trees in a national forest. And then frankly, what's been great is that, like I said, we've gotten up to, I think, 1.5 million trees so far. And then this past year, in order to take it to the next level, we've partnered with a nonprofit called One Tree Planted. And we're planting trees now in cities. I think we've picked 5 cities across the country at this point as a test. And it's there to help the urban canopy and to rebuild our cities, which I've been listening to some of your earlier podcasts, and you had some strong experts talking about what's going on in as far as the urban canopies and the lack of trees and the effect on the people that live there.
So I want to just briefly go back to the first 10 years, because as a business, especially in a burgeoning niche segment like this, where education wasn't quite there, the market wasn't there, the awareness wasn't there, How did the company survive the first 10 years, and who are your customers that effectively kept you alive?
Mm-hmm. No, that's a good question. Um, we were being adopted by primarily, I guess, yeah, I'm going to say the artistic community or the cultural creatives. We were being picked up primarily by the smaller coffee shops, the areas in New York where creatives were coming together. And then beyond that, I mean, or associated with that is also the fashion industry has embraced us, which dovetails obviously into the creatives of the world. So the first 10 years was really, excuse me, was really finding those edge of the wedge people that cared. So on the West Coast, we had a very strong business and still have a very strong business. They seem to always be the leader when it comes to environmental activities. So we were embraced there throughout the West Coast. And then, like I said before, there's just pockets of success in the major metropolitan areas like Chicago, New York, Atlanta, Miami. And it was the small mom and pop shops, the small communities that had more the creative or the what we call the light green individuals. So because we are refillable, but for all intents and purposes, we're still single use. The darker green individuals are people that are full on doing all the right things. They're still they use their refillables. What we found is that there's a consumer out there who wants to do the right thing, but they're extremely busy and they have full commitments as far as job and lifestyle, and they still need single use for some reasons, and they're choosing us over the plastic and the aluminum. So those have been, and then to be honest, we chugged along we were very small for those first 10 years. We chugged along. We kept one of the things that Darren is great at is finance, and we kept our spending in line so that we didn't go out of business. And we just plodded along. We talk about the fact that we're the little engine that could, or we're not going to come out in a blaze of glory. It's just small and steady wins the race. So we've slowly grown, and then I can say that in the last 5 years, based on those watershed moments I mentioned, we've had this explosive growth. And we've partnered with major corporations who, like Alaska Airlines or Universal Studios, who we're at this nexus now where corporate America also sees the benefits of helping sustainability, and are choosing to find ways like boxed water, small things to make a big difference.
So let's bring it to current time period, and the competitive landscape has changed quite a bit, I think. I mean, certainly there is aluminum, there are refillables. I mean, if you go to New York, for example, the city very much promotes these places where you can refill filter water into your refillable mugs, for example. And then now you have innovations where you have mugs that have built-in UV, so you can actually clean it and not have to worry about whether your water and your bottle is clean, for example. And then manufacturers are saying, well, we're actually using a lot less plastic. So we're using, from a volume of plastic petrol per bottle, making it thinner and using different designs to hold it and still maintain its integrity, for example. Or others are saying, well, we're using aluminum cans, so it's not so bad after, and it's highly recyclable. What is the landscape from your perspective, and how do you guys stack up?
Mm-hmm. It's a great question. We don't have enough time to go through everything. So we have the largest library in life cycle analysis that discusses exactly what you're talking about. What is, how do we stack up against an aluminum can and a plastic bottle? Plastic bottle sourced domestically, or plastic bottle or plastic water that's sourced from Fiji Islands or Europe. And when you look at, so we talk a lot about recycling, and we can circle back to that. But when you think about the full life cycle, the creation and then the sunsetting of a product, we have there are other things that go into the creation, the extraction, and the production of aluminum and plastic. So under the criteria of like ozone depletion, global warming, carbon footprint, acidification, eutrophication, these are all things that can be measured and are measured by independent groups when you put together a life cycle analysis. So we actually conducted one of these, or we had a third party that conducted one of these on our behalf. And it turns out that we are remarkably, I mean, to the power of 10, and in some cases, 100 times better as far as the carbon footprint that we put off when you're extracting bauxite to make aluminum, and then blow mold it, and then molding that aluminum, smelting that aluminum. The amount of pollution that's put into this world is literally exponentially bigger than what it requires to fell a tree and then create the paper and roll the paper. Our cartons don't need to be molded. The pollution that's done by blow molding and creating these things, even when you recycle an aluminum can, and remember 6 out of 10 cans aren't recycled at this point. So the concept of infinite recyclability is a good concept, but that's all it is. It's not a practical real life solution that's going on right now. So how do we stack up? Again, creation, production, we are exponentially better. Much smaller much smaller global carbon footprint than either plastic or aluminum. From a sustainable standpoint, you can plant more trees. You cannot plant more oil. You cannot plant more bauxite into this world. So neither of those are factually sustainable. They're recyclable, but that's again a different conversation. Neither of them are sustainable. This is the only package that is 92% made from trees. Even the cap we have found through our supplier, we've worked out a way. The cap is made from the waste from the newspaper industry. So there are billions of pounds of pulp that sits to the side from the newspaper industry. We've actually found a way to use the cap, and then to create a bioplastic, as well as the lining here, which is a plastic film that's also bio. So 92% of this is made from trees. 0% cans, 0% plastic are made from anything that is sustainable. And then the recyclability aspect. This is where, to be frank, we don't stack up as well. But we're only about 10 to 15 years into this, whereas when you look at some of the ad campaigns that go back to the 70s, plastics 50 years into this, aluminum's 50 years into this, and putting a lot more money against recycling. We have right now 62% of Americans live in a city where they can recycle our carton, and from municipality, from their house. That was only 18% about 10, 15 years ago when we started. We hope to get that to 100%. And more and more municipalities are picking up recyclability. The issue is that you need specific sorting machinery in order to make sure that this gets sorted and out of the waste stream. And more municipalities are doing that. There's a carton council that is working directly with municipalities to help them get the sorting in and making that become a reality. And then, frankly, it all goes back to consumer demand. The reason why recyclability is becoming more and more accessible is because more and more consumers are making this choice. Not just us. So there's water, but the soup stocks that are available in cartons, wine in a box is now available in cartons. The more cartons, all those juice boxes that the kids are drinking, those are all the same sort of cartons. The more that is getting used, the more municipalities see the need and are making this switch. So I think that's like the the abridged version.
Yeah.
Again, we have pages upon pages. We have the largest library of information around sustainability and the impact on the planet. A lot of it is available. We are fully transparent. A lot of it is available at boxedwaterisbetter.com. We encourage people. The life cycle analysis is available there. You can see how we stack up on all the specific criteria, and then decide for yourself.
So thank you for that, and certainly we'll ask our listeners to check those resources out. But first, a comment, and then my next question is I think the last couple of years the conversation or the narrative has been focused around net zero, which I think for the most part a lot of the arguments you provided makes sense from the fact that the process from mining to the entire manufacturing process of aluminum, petroleum products, let's say, does in fact contribute more relative to, let's say, paper, for instance. But the conversation is starting to shift from just net zero to carbon capture and sequestration, because it's one thing to keep our level of pollution flat from new net, but to actually start to reduce what's already up there, we need to rely on different ways, including new technologies that are literally filtering the air system, but more realistically, the ocean and the forest. Now, the challenge with tree cutting companies is that they're cutting, and certainly they're trying to replant, but the reality is we've had lots of scientists and experts that's come on, and they talk about the fact that the way it's being done isn't really ideal. You want to have these mother trees, these ancient trees alive because they help support the entire ecosystem. Whereas I think for tree cutting companies, paper or wood-based companies, they're indiscriminately cutting down these trees, and not to mention it's a monoculture. So it's not the biodiverse types of forests that used to exist, but now we're just creating the same types of trees, and it's fundamentally different. Even if you recycle paper and the pulp and the fiber loses integrity, and there's only a finite cycle before it can be essentially just kind of disappears, and it really can't form the shape anymore. My next question is really around certain segments of the population, and certain segments, especially, let's say, urban areas, highly dense metro areas, where perhaps the public water system is kind of questionable, whether there's lead, whether it's filter, whatever it is. And a lot of those residents are forced to have to buy bottled water for their drinking needs. And one of the arguments that we hear as more and more cities are considering banning plastic water bottles altogether is that can those communities really choose, let's say, a case of plastic water bottles that cost maybe about $5 to a box of can or box water like yours that could cost upwards of $30 or more, and the kind of financial burden that places on those families when, frankly, they can't depend on the public water sources for safe drinking. What's your response to that?
Well, let me back up, because I do want to address your first comment, because there are some interesting things that you touched on that I want to just address. So, noted on the carbon capture, I want to just point out that as far as the trees that are used for us, we do not. We have a third party that monitors where our trees and what forests. So there are specific forests that are using fast growing trees that is sustainable, and it's managed by not only the government, but also by some third parties. So there are tree farms that we use our paper. We don't go into any natural or any old growth forests in order to use the paper for our processes. That's just that would. I would side with you and say that that's not sustainable, nor is that smart. So we have specifically used specific wood that is done in a tree farm and not touching old growth. And frankly, the trees that we plant are all in the national forests, because 173 million acres of forest is destroyed every year for wildfires and pestilence and whatnot. So we're back planting trees in those old growth areas, working with the National Forest Foundation, which does exactly what you said, creates biodiversity, doesn't just do the same trees. So as far as carbon capture, I mean, we're probably the leader in our area for trying to regenerate and regrow and help the carbon footprint. And then as far as recyclability, you're right-ish in the sense of, or at least from my perspective, what the research I've done. So your plastic bottles for food purposes can only be recycled 3 to 5 times, and then they cannot be used for food anymore. So there is a limited life for recyclability there. Our cartons, luckily, have, and it's interesting that you point this out because most people don't realize this, but our cartons actually are long fiber cartons. So they are in great demand for people like Kimberly Clark who want to use high quality paper. So our paper is perfect for recyclability. And then the conversation about plastic industry. The last report that I read, the last industry report that I said from the plastics industry, they're planning to quadruple their capacity in the next 5 to 10 years, which is already quadrupled in the last 5 to 10 years. So they don't see any end in sight as far as producing more and more plastic. So there isn't, while some of the bottle manufacturers are making things thinner, it's not going in the right direction. Recyclability has gone from 8%, or recycling has gone from 8% to 4.7%. And just one of the things that we note is when you start using a cheaper plastic and a thinner plastic, some of the chemicals that are used in order to do that and maintain its integrity we're finding are harmful for humans as far as BPA and the effects of that. So those are some of the things that we've learned along the way when it pertains to making sure. Again, we want to make sure that we're doing the right thing and we're not greenwashing or fooling ourselves. We're transparent. We're not the best, but we're definitely better in those areas.
So we only have a couple of minutes. If you could address the question around some of these communities that are adversely affected by some of the substitutes or pricing of those substitutes.
Yeah, no, I understand and I empathize with that. Excuse me. Unfortunately, the cost of creating our product is 5 to 7 times more expensive than creating a plastic bottle. And that's one of the reasons why plastic and aluminum have been around for so long, is that they're cheap and they're durable, but they are bad for the environment. So we price our product actually at a very low margin, you would say, so that the consumers don't have to make we try to make it as accessible as possible. If we were using the same margins that a Dasani or others would be using, our product would probably be closer to $75 to $80 a case, which would translate into closer to $13 to $15 a bottle. So we are doing what we can in order to keep our prices as low as possible. The dynamic is what it is. I am a big believer in two things. I'm a big believer in governmental assistance in these areas. I have been a champion of when you think of the logic of we fund the post office, we fund Amtrak. There's things that we fund. They fund the freeways from a governmental assistance. We fund these things because it's important to our society. I believe two things. One is recyclability. The recycling process needs to be relooked and have an oversight from the government in order to make it more. Right now, it's driven strictly by profit, which is one of the things that's hindering us from being plastic cartons as well as aluminum being 100% recycled in this country. The other thing is what you called out. I believe that there needs to be not only drinking water that is filtered, that is accessible for everybody, but these areas that are impoverished and don't have drinking water, we need to create an infrastructure where there is drinking water. Well, whether it's obviously fixing the pipes, or if it's putting in filtration systems that are easily accessible. There's 80 billion bottles of water being made every year in this country. So we can afford as a country to try to help these individuals that can't get the water that they need.
All right, so we're out of time. I have been joined by Robert Koenen, Chief Revenue Officer at Box Water is Better. Thank you for joining today.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
If you've enjoyed this episode, take a moment to rate our show on any podcast platform that you listen to. Scroll down to the bottom and push 5 stars. It's that easy. And as always, thanks for listening.